Imagine if they lived today. Goodness, what a change. But we're smart now. We're modern. We're postmodern. We know everything. We've got it figured out. And because we've impacted our likeness onto God, we just decide that He's going to take whatever we give Him, whether He likes it or not. So we have things that are clearly stated doctrines in the Bible that go untaught and unpreached simply because God's just happy with us being here. You see the vanity of that? God's satisfied that I've just decided to grace His door at 11 o'clock. Depart from me, you that work iniquity, but I never knew you. How many will hear that? Lord, didn't we do it? Didn't we do all this great work? Well, what difference is it going to make? What shall a man give for his soul? What shall a man give in exchange for his soul? It's crazy. Paul's reason for writing is in verses 2 through 5, and I think this is one of my pivotal favorite parts of this book for this reason. He lays very concisely out what his expectation is. We see that in verse 2. He said, I came to know nothing from you but Jesus Christ and Him crucified. And he goes on to say in verse 3, and I was with you in weakness and in fear and much trembling, and my speech and my preaching was not with enticing words of man's wisdom, but a demonstration of the Spirit and of power, that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the wisdom of God. And you notice something about there, he deals with the number one problem men in today's society have. Their own intellect. They're too smart for God. Or they figured out a better way to do it. And that's my favorite one of all of them. If there's nothing that can Satan can deceive you with easier, then you're doing okay. God will accept whatever way you decide to do. You decided to come to church. But see, folks, there's a reason that we have differences between churches. There's a reason we have denominations. It's not so that we can stand up here and yelp at each other about who's different from the other. But I'm going to tell you something. If you think it's not your responsibility to pick up your Bible, read it, and go to one that preaches and teaches what's in it, you're wrong. That's as simple as it is. If it's not this one, then there's 1,000 other Baptist churches. If not a Baptist church, Baptists aren't the only ones who believe the Bible. But I'm going to tell you something. If you don't believe that Bible, and you don't get into it, and you don't find what God is trying to give you, you're going to find that you're going to be empty for a long time. You're going to find that you're going to be without satisfaction for a long time. Look at verse 5 again. It says that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but on the wisdom of God. Don't take anything anybody says in the pulpit for granted. You have that Bible for a reason. Pick it up, pray, and read it. And if you do that, what you'll find is that it has expectations of you. It gives you commands. It'll interrupt your daily life. It'll make your life filled with a few more things you have to do every week. But what you'll also find is peace that surpasseth all understanding, salvation unto your soul, rest in the end day. When that proverbial grim reaper comes for you, you'll have peace. But you won't find that anywhere else. You won't grow in that anywhere else but a church. You know, it's hard for me today because I see that obviously the world has taken such a different shift. I know that there's so many things that get in the way of our lives, but really, is there anything more today than there was 100 years ago? I mean, maybe they didn't have cars and air conditioners and everything else, but instead of having a yard to mow, they probably had a ranch to mow. Instead of having 1 or 2 people to feed, they may have 30 people to feed. They may have had several big families. They drove, if they even had a car, miles upon miles to get to a church or to get to a store, or to get to anywhere you would have went. Can we really say that we've got so much more to do than they ever did? No, what's happened is we've decided to imprint our impression of God upon Him and call that God. God will accept what I decide to give Him, or He won't get it. Oh, He'll get it. Whether you like it or not, He'll get it. We must be very careful not to allow ourselves to slip into a mindset that says, I'll give to God when I'm ready to, when I feel like I can, when I think I've got enough. Because the one thing I can say is the truest statement ever heard. Good old Brother Ray over at Woodland told me one day when I was just gotten to the church one time, and I made the mistake, and it was the only time I've said this in my life, I don't have enough. He said, if you don't think you have enough now, wait until the little you have is gone. Then tell God you don't have enough. And you know that I guess a firework went off in my head that day. And you know, it's difficult. It's difficult to find time to serve. It's difficult to find time to give. It's difficult in this, even in economy, from a financial perspective. It's hard on everybody. But if we can't be faithful in the little things that we have, is God ever going to give us any more? I mean, just think, even with your human mind, does that make any logical sense? If you came to me and you've never held more than $1,000 in your bank at any time in history, am I going to go give you $1 million? That's stupid. You're going to blow through it in about 30 minutes, and I'm going to be left with nothing to come back to. Remember the servants that Jesus left, his proverb left the talents to? And then what happened? You know, some came back with gain, and some just kind of hit him under a rock and just waiting for nothing to happen. And he said, well, what happened here? I gave you something to build on, and you didn't do anything with it. You were a waste. To do nothing for God is a waste of your life. That's the reason for which you were made. When we don't do that, we leave out on something that not only gives a great blessing, but we receive one. You know, not everybody is a missionary. Not everybody's a preacher or Sunday school teacher or learn or reads well or has all these things. But there's one commonality, kind of like Brother was talking about this morning, that one commonality with saved people is that they all share the same blood. Their skin tone doesn't make a difference. Their language doesn't affect them. The only thing that matters is they're united by that blood. Why then do we make it such a difficult thing on ourselves to obey? What is so hard? Anyway, we're going to go ahead and read a little bit more here now. Start with me in verse 6. We're talking about this wisdom. So first thing, we started off here with what the power of God is. And I want you to keep that context in mind, because everything he says here that we're about to read is going to come back to that cross. I'm going to tell you how in just a minute. And it says true wisdom here. Howbeit we speak wisdom amongst them that are perfect, yet not the wisdom of this world, nor the princes of this world that come to naught, but we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, even the hidden wisdom which God ordained before the world unto our glory, which none of the princes of this world knew, for had they known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. I love those verses. It's a good quotation of some Old Testament saint there. And I'll tell you that it's one of the most powerful promises that's in the Bible. We cannot fathom the magnitude of what God has for us. I love it. That's why I always tell you, I just love it when I hear these theologians on TV argue about heaven. Who cares? You can't even begin to comprehend what it's going to be like. Why does it matter to you in the least to sit here and argue about it? He's going to be just as surprised as you are, I promise. You're both saved. You know, but we don't think about things like that. It becomes a contention. We have to argue about it. We have to fight about it. And the same thing happens all the time in the world today, that we start, by those arguments, those little lingerings that come into our lives, we start to reflect the people of the world more than Jesus Christ. Did he ever argue with anybody? You know what he did? He told them the truth, and then they either heard it or they didn't. I mean, it was hurtful. He said some pretty sharp words sometimes. Lest you come unto me, you shall surely die. I'm sure they took that real well. But that was it. Tell them the truth, leave them. The same thing happens today. If we're going to carry on for another generation, if our churches, our friends, our families are going to make it, if the Lord tarries, this is what it's going to take. That old-time religion wasn't foolish. See, that's the other thing. As time progresses, we've all been there. I mean, everybody basically here as an adult, there's always, as a kid, you always think your parents are like old and decrepit. What do they know? So naturally, as progression of humanity and sinfulness goes on, why should, for some reason, God be different today than he was 20 years ago? Or 50 years ago? Or in 1951 when the church was built? Or in 1835? Or in 1560 during the Reformation? Or in 1137 Council of Trent. I mean, does God change anywhere? If God didn't change anywhere, then what changed? We did. Our understanding has gone by the wayside because nobody cares about the Bible. Our nation has gone down the hole because nobody cares about God. And under the guise of godliness, it's happened right under our nose. Gone are the days of having evangelists who would preach to anybody, or pastors who would take whatever church God led them to because they're all looking for a dollar. They're looking for a cheap thrill. Money gives them. I'm happy to tell you I'm about as broke as they come. And it doesn't bother me a bit. Folks, we must be careful not to put God behind us, but in front of us. When we talk about preaching Jesus and Him crucified, what exactly does that mean? It means, just like he said over in 1 Corinthians 1:18, that preaching of that cross is foolishness only to one group of people, to them that perish, to them who are dead, to them who are without hope. But to those of us which believe, it is the power of God. He writes it another way in the book of Romans, for it is the power of God unto salvation for all them that believe. What that also means is it's the power unto condemnation for all of you who have rejected it. Every person has free will. And free will is probably one of the most disputed things in the Bible. Some argue that God gives us a perception of free will and that we're allowed to live out a meager and pointless life just to see if we're going to make the decisions He already thinks we are in the first place. If that's your view of God, you put Him in a box. He didn't put Himself in that box. Just because God knows how things will turn out does not mean He's making a decision for you. Just because God is omnipotent doesn't mean that He's ignorant. We must stop putting human characteristics on an infallible God. And this true wisdom that He gives us here in these 3 verses that we just read, my favorite verse that pops out to me is verse 8. And verse 8 is very powerful. It says, which none of the princes of this world knew, for had they have known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. Talked a little bit in the Sunday school about the King of the Jews. And you remember that their accusation that with the whole thing that started the whole thing is in John 14 when Jesus had walked up without the temple and told them that before Abraham was, I am, and He had forgiven that man's sins. And He said to go thy way, thy sins be forgiven thee. And they immediately said, this man is guilty, is worthy of death. And then they give a reason. Because he has made himself equal with God. Because only God can forgive sins. Their own profession was that this man was God. When he stood before Pilate and he asked him, are you the King of the Jews? He said, thou sayest that I am. He didn't even give an answer for himself. If you aren't worried about me, you wouldn't have me up on this chopping block. You say that I am. What difference does it make what they say? 3 times this man tried to spare Jesus' life. And ironically, he washes his hands of it. And Jesus, in a pivotal moment in his life, turns to him and says that him that delivered me to you hath the greater sin. What was that sin? He was that the princes of this world did not know who he was. He came into his own, and his own received him not. Today he does the same thing. See, then, mortal life, lived as a man and as God, revealed the Father unto us in a way by which we may reach Him. But today you have a much more precious picture than even those who saw Him firsthand did. It says, blessed are those